In this era of digital photography, film photography is at a resurgence. While film photography can be loads of fun and incredibly instructive, there are many reasons why using film for photography sucks. Here are 7 reasons why I believe film photography sucks. Reason 7 is shocking, but hang on until the end and I'll tell you why I think film photography is still the best way to learn photography and what your camera can and cannot do. One of the most frustrating things about film photography, especially if you're used to shooting digital, is the fact that after your exposure, there's no way to preview the image. There's no LCD screen on a film camera. So until your film is developed and processed, you have no idea what you actually captured on that frame of film. When I was doing location portraiture back in the 1980s, I would put a Polaroid film back on the back of my Hasselblad camera. That you'd take off the film back and be able to snap on this Polaroid back. I'd get all the lights set up, I'd snap an image, and then I could pull the Polaroid out, wait the 60 seconds, peel it apart, and I could see my lighting setup. Now that was pretty good for checking lighting, but there's no way with that little teeny 2¼ inch square Polaroid that you could see the focus of your image or some of the fine details that were going on. You had to trust yourself, you had to understand your equipment, the aperture and everything else about the camera and the lenses to be sure that that image that you were being paid to create was exactly what that customer wanted and within the parameters of what that film could handle as far as exposure. The ability with a modern digital camera to see on that screen on the back what the image is, what you're about to photograph, and then you can preview the image and zoom right in after you had that image exposed to know that you absolutely got that image that you were hoping to capture. It's like a miracle. With a medium format film camera, such as this Mamiya C220, you're limited to either 12 or 24 exposures on that roll of film. Other medium format cameras, such as the 645 format, you can get 15 exposures on a roll, or the larger format cameras, like an RB67 or a Pentax 6x7, you're going to get about 8 or 10 exposures on that roll of film. 35mm cameras, such as this Olympus OM1, do fare a little bit better. Usually when you buy a roll of 35mm film, you're going to get either 24 or 36 exposures on that roll of film. If you're going on an extended trip, you're going to need to pack dozens of rolls of film to come close to the amount of images that you can get on just one SD card. Assuming 30 megabytes per raw image, you're going to be able to get about 2,200 images, raw images, on a 64 gigabyte SD card. And if you're a JPEG shooter, that's over 12,000. In fact, about 12,600 images that you're going to be able to fit on a single 64 gigabyte SD card. To get that many exposures on 35mm film, you're going to have to pack about 350 rolls with you. And that is going to take up a lot of room in your suitcase. I'm sure you know that film is sensitive to light. I mean, that's what makes it work. But it can also be exposed to radiation outside of our visual spectrum, such as X-rays in airport security. Now, the X-rays used in modern security clearance is nowhere near as strong as what it used to be, but still in some areas of the world, they're using older technology, and those X-rays can easily penetrate the metal layer on this film and expose that film in there, at least fog it so your images aren't clear and distinct. What you need in those circumstances is one of these, and this is a film shield. It's actually a lead bag that you can put your film into, and you fold it up and secure it with a clip, and you have all your rolls of film in there, probably not 350 rolls, and this will protect that film from X-rays. Now, of course, if you use something like this and you're going through the security check, you're going to need to request that your equipment be hand inspected. And a number of people do that now. But when you start running something like this that the x-rays can't penetrate, they're going to really start to wonder why you're doing that and what in the world is in there that you're trying to hide from them. So be prepared for a few extra delays at airport security while they try to discern what you're doing. And hopefully everybody there speaks the language you speak, so there aren't any further delays. The other thing that can affect film is a thing called light piping, and that's where light can hit the edge of the film and light will travel through that film much like light travels through glass or plastic fiber optics. It'll actually bounce around and travel all the way through into this film quite a ways deep and fog that film, and again ruin the contrast and ruin the colors of the images that either you've just taken or will be taking with your unexposed film. With a modern digital camera, you have control of all three sides of that exposure triangle: ISO, aperture, and shutter speed or exposure time to create the perfect exposure that you envision. When you're shooting in film, you really only have control of two of those sides of that triangle, and that's going to be the aperture and the shutter speed on your camera. That third leg or that third side of that exposure triangle, ISO, is going to be determined by what film you put in the camera. For instance, if you load this roll of Acros 100 in your film, you got an ISO 100, and that's what you have for the next 36 exposures you're going to shoot in this film. And if you end up in a situation where you have to deviate a little bit from that ISO 100, you underexpose your film by one stop, your shadow details are gone. You overexpose it by a couple of stops, your highlights are blown out. So you have to know what you're about to shoot for the entire length of time you're shooting this film so that the ISO is what you need for the situations you're in. This means that you need to choose your film wisely for the type of shooting conditions you're in. If you load some 1600 speed film into your camera and then end up at a bright beach scene, everything is going to be blown out in those images. You're not going to be able to recover that. Conversely, if you use a slower speed film, such as something with an ISO of 64, 52, or even 100, and you find yourself in a very dark situation, maybe a dark restaurant in the evening, in a cave, doing some exploration, in an attic, looking around, who knows where it might be, you're going to have almost no detail in those photographs. Your camera can't take in enough light to properly expose that film without an external light source. If you load color film into your film camera, guess what? You're taking color images. If you load black and white film into your camera, again, you'll be taking black and white images. There is no software that's going to convert this black and white negative to a full color image. If you shoot a RAW file with your digital camera, you can recover all this data. It's all there. You can shoot with a black and white film simulation in your camera, but if you're shooting RAW, all of the color data is still there. You can decide at a later time that you actually want a color image. Or if you shoot with color on your digital camera and you decide you want a black and white edit, you can do that as well. All of that original data is preserved in that file on your digital camera. In other words, a black and white negative will always be a black and white negative and produce a black and white image. Trivia for you, it wasn't until probably the mid-1970s until professional photographers, professional portrait photographers, adopted color film to use. Until that time frame, all portraiture was still shot in black and white, portraits, weddings, and the like. Almost all photographers still shot black and white, and then when people wanted color images, they would be hand tinted, hand colored with dyes. Kodak made a set of dyes that were kind of like wax. They were called flexichrome, and you would actually color each image individually or use some paints, and that's how a lot of photo retouching was done in those days too. But the fact that I can shoot an image with my Fujifilm camera, I can set it to classic chrome, I can set it to Velvia, I can set it to monochrome, I can set it to acros, close, and I can simulate a green filter or a red filter on the camera, and that's what I see in my viewfinder, and that's what I'm shooting. But I still have all the raw data, and I can create any one of these other film simulations later on and post-edit anytime I want. It's almost like a miracle. To be locked into a single emulsion like this can be very limiting. Modern digital cameras have the ability to either auto-adjust white balance for different lighting conditions, or you can manually adjust the white balance for the situation that you find yourself. In fact, in my studio here, all the lights that I use, the lights that I'm using, which are actually modeling lights off of professional strobes, are quartz lamps. So they're at about 3,400 degrees Kelvin. I have these other lights that I've set up, and I have them tuned to 3,400 degrees Kelvin as well. And I've set the camera to 3,400 degrees Kelvin, so I have a nice white balance on the image. With color film, it is going to have a white balance on it. It will either be a daylight balance film or a tungsten balance film. A daylight balance film, such as this Kodak Portra 160 or Portra 400, is going to be set for a daylight color balance, or around 5,500, 5,600 degrees Kelvin, and you will get proper color rendition in those circumstances. You use a daylight balance film indoors under tungsten or incandescent light. Those are normal old-fashioned light bulbs. Your photographs are going to be a very gold yellow color. They're not going to have that crisp color to them. They're going to be a very soft, indoorsy kind of look. That may be a look that you're after, and that's a way you can achieve that with film. Tungsten film is balanced for that 3,200 degree Kelvin light, or a standard incandescent light bulb. That film is color balanced for that. Now, if you take tungsten film and you shoot it outside, all your images are going to be this weird, funky, turquoisey blue that is going to be almost impossible to color correct when you're making the prints off an enlarger, or if you're doing color correction off a scanned file that you put into Lightroom or Photoshop or whatever photo processing software you use. Film photography is much more expensive than digital photography. Remember earlier when I said it would take about 350 rolls of 35mm film to equal what you can store on one 64 gigabyte SD card? As of the filming of this video, a roll of Kodak Gold 200 runs about $11 for a 36 exposure roll. 350 rolls of Kodak Gold 200 is going to set you back $3,850 US. Conversely, a quality 64 gigabyte SD card is going to cost you about 20 bucks. Oh, you might want to have that film developed using a quality color lab. In fact, I chose the Darkroom in California. Their price to develop a 36 exposure roll of 35mm film is about 12 bucks, including scanning. You add the cost of the film and the processing together, and you're at about $8,000 US. And that's without any prints. All that being said, I think that film photography is one of the best ways that you can really learn photography, how your camera works, and how to properly expose an image. And basically, that's because there's nowhere to hide. If you underexpose that film, there's no lifting the shadows in post. That detail is just gone. And if you overexpose your film by a couple of stops, there's no bringing down the highlights to recover anything blocked. That's blocked. It's gone. You don't have any wiggle room in film. So, in my opinion, by shooting film, you learn to tighten up your exposures. You learn to see into those shadows a little bit and make sure there's enough light that the film can record that. You learn to look at the highlights and make sure that you're exposing right so that those highlights are not blocked up. Your eyes also become a little more trained to see things the way the camera lens sees things. There's only one camera lens and there's two eyes, so we have binocular and three-dimensional vision to learn to see how the camera sees, how it can selectively focus, and what your image is going to be. To see that and envision that before you actually see it, you don't have that LCD screen on the back to preview your image. You have to know in your mind and in your eye when you look through that camera what that image is actually going to look like. That's incredible training to help speed up your workflow in shooting with a digital camera. You also learn to be a little more careful and a little more deliberate in composing your photographs. Limited to 36 exposures on a roll of film, you don't have that many exposures. You can't just rapid fire off 1,000 exposures, spray and pray so that you get a good image. You have to think about what you're going to shoot, set up your image, make sure you're composed properly, and photograph that image so that what you envision, what you see when you're out in the field or in the world or in front of your subject, that is actually what's being translated and captured onto that frame of film. Learning to shoot film is one of the best ways that you can improve your photography skills. If you like film, check out this playlist that's right here for you to see other videos about shooting film photography. If you really want to learn about film photography and why it's so good to learn, check out this video that's right here. I'm James Fisher. Remember to like this video, and this is Vintage Insight Photography.